National Social Security Fund Act establishes the NSSF in itself as an institution where, Ugandans are able to save their money. This particular week, the executive director, Mr. Ayota, did present to the country a report on the performance of the NSSF, where he did indicate a 15% growth in the fund from 1.9 trillion to 2.2 trillion in this current financial year. So we shall delve into that and issues arising from that particular aspect. Then also, the state of the economy. The price of fuel continues to go high, and that has in tandem affected the price of other commodities. Now, this comes at the wake of Uganda, spending so much money on a New York delegation. So I don't know, is our government preaching water and taking wine in terms of a frugal and lean government? And, where is the economy headed? Are there tough times ahead? We shall, delve in that as well. And to put this into perspective, you as a panel of eminent citizens, that it's now my pleasure to introduce to you, and in no particular order, of course, at the center of the panelists is a congressman from Uganda People's Congress and a media personality. Joseph Ochieno is the name. Joseph, very pleased to have you.
Good to be here discussing NSSF, our cash cow for the citizens of the Republic.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have you. To the extreme left is from the National Resistance Movement Secretariat, and that is Council and the Director for External Affairs of the NRM Secretariat, Retired Major Awich Pollar is the name. Retired Major, it's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, and it's always good to interface with citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Retired Major came back from China recently. When you hear the word secretary, they tend to be much more posher than the one director. Why didn't you just continue to call him Secretary for External Affairs?
Well, it's safer to use what is in the Constitution.
An interesting title, lawyer.
Thank you very much. Next to myself is the lady dubbed in a pink blazer this afternoon. Lawyer and Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance is Dr. Sarah Bireete. Doctor, we are happy to have you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes. Retired Major, let me just begin with you. The report by the NSSF boss, does it speak to the reality on ground?
Well, as you said, we always interface with the citizens. It's also an informing and mind researching session. So we tend to share the information that we have. Now, before I answer the question, I would like to make a disclaimer that I wish there was somebody from National Social Security Fund to have given us what they're saying so that I don't seem to be talking from hearsay. But unfortunately, we don't have such a person. So we shall rely on the information that this panel has. Secondly, I'd like to also mention something to do with the National Social Security Fund, what it is or its history. Somehow after the First World War, 1914 to 1918, there wasn't, especially in America, there wasn't a clear safety catch for the aged. It also moved down to around 1930 where there was a depression in America, and those who had saved their money to use after work really ran penniless. So the world and the society now started thinking that how do we then protect the aged not to be destitute? So it is on that ground that the world said to give a social safety catch, let's get a provision where a worker contributes some money and his employer contributes some money, and this money is put somewhere to protect an old person, so that an old person is not destitute when he's old or doesn't even become a burden to the community. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then the aged start depending on relatives, either children or brothers or sisters, to support at old age. And fast forward, even if you put it now, if you don't have such a provision, it makes people start providing their own social security fund, and that borders corruption. Because somebody knows I will not be sure about my future, so let me grab as much money as possible so that I create my own future social security fund. Now, also worth mentioning is that when the 1917 revolution broke out in Soviet Union, it was a socialist country, and at the center of it were the workers. So the workers were so committed about the welfare of workers during work and after work. So social security system came into place, became a global phenomenon. I talked to a professor in German who told me that the lifestyle he has when he graduated from university, he will live it until he dies. I asked him to explain. He said, if I started work after university and I take a glass of wine after dinner, I will take my glass of wine after dinner till I die, even if I die at 90. He said, why? Because our social security system works to an extent that even if I leave work, my social security is very firm and it protects me. So I live my normal life till death. So this now comes to Uganda. It was actually courtesy of the Congress. UPC actually is the one which established the National Social Security Fund in Uganda. And unfortunately, about a month ago, the person who established it died. It was called Baingana.
Yeah.
Baingana is from Rukunjiri, is the one who established the National Social Security Fund of Uganda. They went to Obote, and Obote sent them to East Germany then. And remember, East Germany was a socialist country. So when Baingana came back from East Germany, Obote now gave them a go-ahead, and all the relevant legislations and procedures were put, and social security was in place. Now, the recent pronouncement that you're saying, it pronounces that there was that increase in the 2 trillion. I hope it is true, because with the current mistrust in financial management, I hope somebody is not pronouncing here. And then you go to check, there's nothing in the account. So we need to do. I hope there are procedures in place.
This is breaking news.
Either by
Retired Major, is that lack of faith in
No.
your I mean,
It's breaking news.
Breaking news.
what is news about that?
no, I mean, I thought you're the party in power.
Yes, but
And
that does
therefore,
not mean.
you-
I am saying, and I want to make it clear.
You are duty
Fair-
bearer.
What
fair
I'm saying
objective,
is that
yes.
when somebody comes up with a pronouncement, systems should be in place to check that what is said is what is true. For example, you can have a system by another body like Ministry of Finance, which is the mother Ministry of Funds, or Ministry of Gender, so that we have a double check. Because what is difficult by me, if I was the boss of NSSF and announce a figure, okay, what would you do? So do we have built-in mechanism that it does? Even in government, we have 3 arms of government, which cross-checks the other. So what I'm saying is, it is good news if that money is there. But I am insisting that we should, as a government, as a system, have an inbuilt system where facts which are pronounced are cross-checked and found to be there. Especially with money, it's difficult to announce on paper, but do you have it in the account? Okay? So I am just advocating as a government for double check and proper cross system, not only for this one, but for future continuous management system. Now, if that is done, then it is good. The other thing is, maybe as a wind-up, is to say, like we always say, GDP and whatever GNP, it must crystallize into the welfare of the beneficiaries. If we say it is a GDP of the country, I've always told Sarah that in the case of Uganda, it crystallizes to the long life expectancy now, which is achieved from 45, we are now in 60. So we live longer and we should live happier. Otherwise, with figures and data, it would be meaningless if it doesn't translate to the life of a person. Similarly, NSSF, if this figure is that, it should translate to the life of a beneficiary NSSF. That yes, I have saved, and therefore this is how my social security is catered for. That even after my normal salary work, that I'm out of work, I am now okay. Just like the other professor in German says, for him and for them, not only for him, for them, the social security network is so strong that if you graduated and you're taking a glass of wine after dinner, you will do it till death because of a good social security system.
A good saving culture. All right, Congressman, still your general comments about the status of NSSF.
I think it wouldn't be general. I intended to do so, but Comrade Awich has actually given a very important introduction, and that is that it can't be general, but already very quite clearly specific. And specific because it's a very important topic. But just as Comrade Awich's disclaimer on someone from NSSF, in fact, your producers advised that we were expecting to be joined by someone from NSSF, and except that maybe certain situations arose. And indeed, we were chatting over break that in my mind that maybe if it was systems that worked, this being a very important matter and NSSF being a very important aspect of our society, that they would not have failed to get an alternative guest to come and appear. But maybe they don't recognize how important their roles and their jobs are to engage. So in a way, it's a little unfortunate. But number two, as Comrade Awich gave the introduction, it's true that the background to some of these programs and were ideological, taking us back to the beginning of the Second World War, in fact, First World War. In fact, those are the beginnings of the quest, particularly on the African continents and others, when nations were beginning to say that, Kumbe, we can also be independent. We are Ugandans, but, we are being pulled from Uganda, but we are fighting for Britain in Burma, fighting for Britain in Ceylon, fighting for Britain in those kind of places. So it was the quest for independence. But fast forward specifically to the funds. While it's actually true that Bayingana was the lead official, apparently these were part of the programs as early as 1962 at independence by the then progressive left UPC government in the broad way thinking globally, including what do you do? NSSF, although it came as part of a legislation in 1964, the early thoughts as early as independence. What are we going to do with our health? What are we going to do with education systems? What are we going to do with our agricultural sector? What are we then going to do with the other aspects of the economy, including the broader welfare of the people? And why I'm saying that is important is in the established nation, other nations like Germany, while their equivalent of NSSFs are there, the safety net for social security, bigger embodiment of the state where there is a guarantee for the livelihoods and health and welfare of the citizens. It's extraordinary that my grandfather literally lived on us in my home. I don't know whether I've told this program. It was a compulsory thing from the time I could remember that my grandfather's food was served first, Sarah, and it was who takes his meal.
Who would take it?
Who would take it, yes. And we enjoyed that. So basically, the elderly depended on us as part of family. That is hardly a reality today. And that is why it's extremely important that agencies like NSSF set, this for the workers. In fact, this is much more the lead. Against the background of our National Health Service, which a future UPC government in which I'm involved will push it back to make it public, to the equivalent of how the others were doing theirs to guarantee universal health access for all and free at the point of delivery. For NSSF, I am sad, Comrade Awich, that I know many, many, many Ugandans who saved their monies and many who died without touching a penny of their money. And I think that's why, hence, I also get part of your lamentation. It's a very important point. I know many, many Ugandans in their big numbers, probably half a dozen, Sarah, who are seeking their hundreds of millions of Uganda shillings equivalent from NSSF, and they cannot access the money, and they're here. And it's sort of like business as usual. I know a particular Ugandan who had to be aided in order for a house to be built for him, hoping that they were going to get money. And I know the person who helped to lend the money to be able to turn around the land. Now, this is a big civil servant, public servant, who had made huge amount of contribution to this country. So while then, hence, we are here to talk about the 15%, and by the 15% is a big number, if true. 15% is a big number. In fact, growth of such a fund, even if it was actually 3-4%, Sarah, you know, for a $1 trillion shilling worthy fund per year, per annum, that is actually growth, and particularly if it were, and it was net growth, and net growth in terms of the overall, take into account all the other expenses, it's actually huge. How then can we guarantee, one, facts about this thing, that one, this is true. Two, we've just been having a conversation not so long ago about the conflict between NSSF and then the ministers for gender, and the conversations about that and the Minister for Finance. There is actually a former Minister for Labor who right now is in exile with huge accusations about this fund. That is a subject that every time is brought on table, people sink it down on table, people sink it down. Videos are doing the rounds, you know, because this is fact where a former minister accuses particular individuals of dipping their hands in the monies that UPC founded for the people of the Republic of Uganda. And as I said, where some people die, you know, like scavengers in the corners of particular homes around the country. And these are citizens who did not only make the contributions, made their savings, but people who made net contributions, changing the livelihoods of the citizens of this country. So while we welcome this, and while it is true apparently that we now have a new managing director for NSSF, I hope that the politics of using NSSF as a cash cow, not for the peoples and for the citizens of this country, but cash cow for politicians, people in government, Mr. Museveni's office, you know, and playing, including seemingly the appointments of leaders of these organizations as a politics of like patronage, not far away from politics of appointing ambassadors and teams to the UN, that I hope that we're able to review that. Because actually, I don't think, Moses, that, and I don't know, I don't think Ugandans take this thing as seriously as they ought to be. Because I said, one, the fund is huge. Two, the implications, as Comrade Awich says, is huge. And particularly a nation state in which there is no social safety net, social security net, safety net, where public health is no longer a guarantee, public education is no longer a guarantee, job security is no longer a guarantee, and actually even with the death of the family, where perhaps, you know, people like us hitting towards 60, there is beginning to have less guarantee that we shall be able to be dependent on our children, you know. It's extremely important that this fund that was set up by us, you know, exactly, it's now 61 years ago, as I said, as 1962, but really 59, thereabout, is remain streamed, and the conversation goes beyond this profit thing, but much more critical that we look at the ins and outs and the details of this fund, because it's an important part of our future economy. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Sarah, as I move to you, is that let's just examine one or two things, because Mr. Ayota tells us that their vision as NSSF is that by 2035, they don't have 50% of Ugandans saving with them. It means that currently, as it stands, there are very few Ugandans who are saving with NSSF. So the question is, even when we aspire to grow this fund as a country, do we see many Ugandans being motivated to save with NSSF, given what Joseph just mentioned, the politics that is surrounding NSSF? Are Ugandans
I think for
inspired
me,
to save?
beyond the politics, the question is save what? How many Ugandans earn? What should they save? We have 2 million Ugandans paying tax, regular tax payee. 2 million Ugandans out of 46. 2 million. So save what? Payee threshold is 235,000. So you have Ugandans who earn 235,000 and above, limited to 2 million.
That's extraordinary, you know, the way you're saying it, yes.
Yes, but also beyond that, Bank of Uganda released a report that only 1% of Ugandans earn 1 million and above. a month. So what should Ugandans save? Where are you going to get 50% without building incomes? And I want to go back to the foundation set by my co-panelists here. What is social security? Social security goes beyond the fund.
Yeah.
The fund is security for working citizens.
Meaning the second tier
Yes.
of citizenry.
And if you go by the payee threshold, you're looking at 2 million Ugandans in formal employment. And everybody else is out. I know that the NSSF Act has been amended to include people in informal sector, remove all the threshold to try to encourage that.
Yeah.
But what is the income of Ugandans? 70% of our national revenue is generated from 3 districts: Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono.
70 what?
Percent
70%.
of our income is generated through Greater Kampala. You have the rest of 129 districts contributing 30% into our national basket. So what is the revenue beyond Greater Kampala? What is the income of people beyond Greater Kampala? We have only 7 districts in the middle income status. From the 3 Greater Kampala, you add Mpigi, Masaka, Mbarara, Mbari is not yet there. You add, I will get the others, Ginger. and that's all. That's all. These are the people, the states that can raise income of $1,000 per annum. That is 3.3 million per year. So I think we need to look at the actual social security protection of citizens. That includes provision of basic health services, education, health, sanitation, and security, human security. These would be the catalysts to jumpstart the household incomes of Ugandans. So if the discussion of the fund just touches on the elite. It is an elitist argument. You are talking of 2 million% of Ugandans. Because the people who pay automatically pay NSSF. So as much as we have removed the threshold to say even people who can contribute, but you cannot pay, even URA and NSSF keep merging data. You cannot contribute to NSSF without contributing to URA. Pay tax as you save. Yeah, because that data is merged somehow and is easy to synchronize. So unless we build incomes for Ugandans, then there is no social security to talk about. And we should not use an elitist privileged fund to assume that Ugandans are benefiting. Because what is the percentage of the elite in this country? More than half of the NSSF savers don't even have 10 million. Then the other half has 50 million. It's only, I think, about 5% that goes beyond 50 to 100 million, and then the 1%, as usual, are the owners of that money. So as we discuss interest in NSSF, it's largely the interest of the 1% top earners. And these are the top executives in big organizations. The majority savers don't even have a total of 10 million. So if you retired today, what is 10 million? In retirement, can you have the wine like Awich was saying? You can't have a wine every day for the rest of your life. You can't.
Not even a bottle of beer.
Then, Doctor, because now I have to compare your evaluation with what President Ruto said last year, and he was trying to credit our NSSF system and saying that,
because
Kenya,
we have invested
Kenya
there
to,
and they caused
Kenya
us a $1 trillion loss through their instability. Yes, we have invested a lot of money. It's
aren't
unfortunate
countries
that the
benchmarking
corporate
on us?
relations manager did not show up because we don't have statistics on our fingertips. We have invested a lot of money in Kenya's market as Uganda's NSSF. And we are actually profitable in East Africa.
Yeah.
But profitable to whose benefit is what I'm discussing. So what the President Ruto said is true. But we need to, to make statistics speak in the interest of the common man. So what I'm discussing is the proportion of people who benefit from NSSF. The more than half that can't even, whose savings don't total up to 10 million, are not beneficiaries. Even if you posted the 10% announcement interest on their account, you'll find you are sending them 200,000. So what is that? What is that? If you go to the second half, the second biggest chunk are between 10 to 50 million. Only up to the 10% top are the ones who can benefit from the announcements of NSSF. Because the statistics are there, except I thought I came with the comfort of knowing we have a guest from NSSF. But, this is what we need to look at in the larger context. So when you go back to the specifics of has NSSF delivered, should we congratulate them? I share the sentiments shared by Afande Awich that we need to have a checks and balances mechanism to quantify the talk of NSSF. Because it is easier to announce figures and throw them around, especially because when you want to build confidence. This year NSSF has been stuck
has had
in
very bad
scandals.
press. Very bad press, yes.
Not just bad press, they had a management crisis.
That's correct.
With political interference. They had a stalemate for about 6 months. So I would want to know also that the so-called money is there. And NSSF has registered the $1 trillion because of instability in the market in Kenya. So when you register $1 trillion on one hand, how do you measure the profit and the announcements? How do you balance that you register loss, remarkable loss, and at the same time you are announcing profit?
You see, sir,
how does it work?
See, sir, that's why I've always been wishing you in Wanyanga Girls, because you've now woken me up in a very particular way. No, I think that's an extremely important point. And the point, as Sarah said, it would be very interesting to get an NSSF perspective on that very particular point. Anyway, that's really what I was saying.
Yeah, because how does it work?
Yeah, there's
1.05 trillion loss.
Then at the same time, we are announcing an increase in the fund.
15% profit.
Increase in the fund.
And we know that our economy has not been doing well. I just checked the statistics from Bank of Uganda as I was coming. We've just managed to bring down inflation. Core inflation at 3.5 and then high inflation at 3.3. And this is a big achievement as announced by Bank of Uganda because according to them, they are bringing down inflation. But they are also warning us about the drivers. And this is a report launched jointly by the Statistics House and Bank of Uganda at the beginning of September. They are also warning us about the key drivers of inflation, including fuel prices that have a low rise. I think there has been a gradual rise of slowly, although it's slow, it's not skyrocketing. In the last 2 months of fuel costs, we have a rise of food crops, particular food crops, including onions. Onions are high on the agenda. So we have a headline inflation at 3.5%. It has slowed down from 3.9%. Core inflation at 3.3% from 3.7%. And then you have the food inflation increase from 9.3 to 9.8%. That's quite high. And the higher prices are noted in onions, mangoes, pawpaw, oranges, and fresh beans. But also we need to look at the school fees situation. For me, the practical indicator of the health of Uganda's economy is at the beginning of schools. The struggles of people to take back their children. Even in Kampala, it was reported that the shopping, the back-to-school shopping, was the lowest ever noted. So what is the actual health of our economy?
Okay, we shall get to the economy much later on. Retired Major, let's speak to the management of NSSF as a fund. Is that before the amendment?
Do you mind, just briefly, just to sort of wrap up what Sarah was trying to say, that in fact all of us, notwithstanding everything else, the credit that NSSF would have as a health organization, just for the clarity purposes, as a health organization, a health national organization, we are very proud of you, NSSF, and we wish you well and well and well, is that then as they grow, notwithstanding the core limited number of the privileged beneficiaries, if NSSF went and is well managed, went and there is no political interference, and it's a national organization, went and invested in Kenya and grew, went and created more wealth, and amongst the wealthy people here go ahead and create, shopping malls out of their money rather than out of our stolen money from the national coffers. They go ahead and invested, say, for instance, for argument's sake, in housing, and we've talked about these things. For instance, social housing, therefore, that very likely for you at the Makere Chivulu, there is the NSSF building, and they're renting it at a competitive public rate for a new emergent graduate people who are coming into employment. So it's fair, That is what would be a net contribution. So meaning other people in the economy would begin to benefit and enjoy. And in fact, if they're strategic, then I argued about this thing, maybe they begin to build in Moroto, maybe they begin to build in Tororo. And in that way, there is a feeding through, a drip effect of their wealth onto the core element of the economy, meaning then the average person may go ahead and sell maybe some tomatoes down the corner of the estates, and Yeah, sure. Yeah, it has an effect, an impact on them. So we're not simply saying that sweepingly we want to disregard NSSF because it's an organization for the privileged.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Retired Major, the question that I was trying to put to you is the issue of management of the fund. Is that before the amendment, NSSF was being managed directly by the Ministry of Gender. But then the amendment put it at in a state where it has 1 feet in Ministry of Gender, 1 feet in Ministry of Finance. We thought that would maybe address the issue that you're raising here, which is now who is checking, who is verifying what NSSF is telling us. I thought that because you have two institutions at the top, they're able to double check. That is one. Two, is that the aspect of the choice of investment that NSSF finds itself participating in. And Joseph raised a very good concern. We saw NSSF construct residential houses that are almost unaffordable in Luboa. Is it Luboa? Somewhere in Luboa.
Sarana.
Yes.
Sarana Estate.
Because the idea is you're trying to create...
Sarana Lifestyle Estate.
Yes. Because
are not affordable by Ugandans.
Because the idea is you're trying to create a social security in terms of housing. But you're constructing magnificent apartments that the ordinary saver cannot even afford to live there. So is NSSF investing the money in the right way?
Well, as I said, they should be here to speak for themselves, but we can see what it is. But first, let me try to answer a question that you put to Sarah, and she deliberately didn't want to answer. You asked her whether the politics that Comrade, the congressman, had explained would affect the motivation for saving. She said she didn't want to answer that. She created her own question and answered it.
I think you misheard.
You said
in my view, beyond the 2 million formerly employed, Ugandans are struggling.
Yes, that
is my response.
Now, suppose he had asked that question and this one to make two questions. Were you going to choose the other one and leave this one? But I want to answer it this way, that indeed, in light of what he has explained, the answer to that question is it will affect the motivation to save. Because if you know that I'm going to save this money, but few years down the road, even when I'm sick, I cannot access it, why would I save anyway? This was, I think, the simple question you asked, Sarah. The few people, is that what you asked?
No, the 50%, but share your perspective.
No.
Take it as a
Share your
may.
perspective.
What
Take
I
it
was
as it
saying,
may.
Leave
Take it
my
as
young
it
man
may.
alone.
I understood your question because the congressman had explained that people put their money
Yes.
at some age when they are sick, when they are what, they can't get it. And my understanding of your question is, doesn't this affect the motivation to save? Like you have in taxation, tax evaders or tax avoidance or something. If anybody had the capacity to avoid this, he would avoid it for the explanation that he has given. And that was, I thought we could share that, because if we have that, then it will talk to the managers of the funds that whatever you are doing will affect potential savers. Because you'll say, if I put my money there and I'm sick, I can't get it, I would rather evade or avoid. I buy land somewhere. When I'm sick, I will sell it. I would rather buy goats or cows, keep it somewhere. So if it was possible to avoid...
I think amid the mess, that's a very fair point, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if it was... So I thought I would bring that question and answer it, because it would inform the managers that, please, whatever you do will affect the motivation to save or not to save. Okay? But if the savers know that the law is clear, the law sets the parameters when and as I can get it, not like, you know, the law is not there and somebody actually, imagine to get this money, either you go to a witch doctor or something.
Arbitrarily.
It's so confusing. So see, why would I save? So I thought I need to say that, because it will inform the managers that, gentlemen, whatever you do
And ladies.
will affect the motivation
The
to save with
confidence,
you.
yes, but just a brief information.
Sure.
Whereas I agree with your point, Afanda, which the question I was asked is, NSSF aims at attaining 50%
Yeah, 50%.
of
savers.
Ugandans as savers. And that was the original question, but I agree with your point.
Okay. Now, I also say that ideally by law, all would be compelled to, but also we know, like in a revenue collection, as even by law, if anybody has the rooms to avoid or evade, they would do it. So the implementation of the law should be accompanied by the benefits of what people get in that law. Otherwise, the enforcement procedures becomes very difficult. You are compelling him, but he's a human being. He knows how to avoid the law. So if by law we shall say whoever earns this much, the threshold will be there, then it will be there. But the challenge is, as I agree again with Sarah, is how do you make people reach the threshold? And therefore, that is why some of us in the broader domain now says those falling out of the payee, we therefore have alternative interventions by way of wealth creation or poverty eradication that we have way and above, because they are not in this bracket. They are not in this bracket. Then we have other interventions out there apart from this. But for now, the topic at hand is those who fall within the bracket. Those who don't, there are other interventions. So, about the management, again, this is a developed institution. We do believe that the governance and the management are well thought out in the law. And we do believe that before they even make the law, they make thorough consultations, including beneficiaries. I know for a fact that if you table such a kind of law in Parliament, you'll have to, a committee of workers would appear before the committee of Parliament. A committee of employers will appear there. So both the employers, the employee, all stakeholders would have given their view. So we do hope that they will discuss the nitty-gritty, including the management. However, time has proved to us that the practicalities, the challenge, even with the law applicable, has become a very serious matter. Either by the judgment of competence of people they employ, because how would you explain a few years down the road, you have sorts of interdiction. The other guy was taken to Luzira. I think he's in Luzira up to now. Recently, I went to Luzira. By the way, I saw him. I had a matter in Luzira. I went there. I saw him. Remember, he's still languishing there. Biarogaba is still in courts of law. So the management then becomes such a challenging thing. As I had earlier said, if they are put it in the two ministries. Remember, by the way, before he went to Janet, it was in finance. It has kind of been moving depending of which political
Is interesting.
leader is strong enough to pull the fund under the docket. And I think now, either because of two strong political leaders, they have managed to share the legs, which to me or to other people would think that it can count well for accountability. But there could even be connivance anyway. But I am still insisting that management should be enforced if it is well thought out in the consultation of stakeholders during the legal process. And in the practicality, for example, in the choice of investment, the choice of investment is a matter of policy. And I think by law, the matter of policy is on the board. Now, how does the law prescribe the board? Does it bring in members with their competency to choose? They could choose, like for example, they choose to invest in that house. They may argue, I don't know their policy, but they may argue that the house that they built was not meant for savers. The house that they build, which is expensive, is to get revenue to put in the fund. And that revenue is the 15% they're saying. So they may argue that we did not build this house for savers. We build this money as investment to get money to bring to us. Because they fear that if you keep cash, cash doesn't grow. But if you invest the cash, you get the profit and keep it in there. So it's a policy matter. But even that policy matter now depends on the competency that you put in the policy making body. And as I said earlier, the policy making body is the board. Okay? So, with all this money and with the history that we have, including having a managing director still serving in Luzira today, and the back and forth which ministry should be to having it now, I'm still saying that we should be sure that if it is posted on the paper, we know the money is there. Ideally, normally, when somebody pronounces the availability of money, you know the litmus proof for now? A bank statement. Because a bank statement is believed never to be doctored, because it would count against the bank, that is, unless there is high-level connivance. But normally, even in laws, in courts of law, a bank statement is proof enough that what you have uttered is actually the money there. Because bank statement can't be forged, ideally. To every general rule, there's exception. Maybe the exception to those who can forge it. But ideally, a bank statement. So, if NSSF announces 2 trillion, I would expect them to put on the table, this is a bank statement, you can go and check, and that is where the money is. To me, mere announcement is not enough. And therefore, even the relevant bodies that I'm talking of, checks and balances, would go and check and said, yes, you announced 2 trillion, you gave us a bank statement, we checked, and we found the money is there. Otherwise, I mean, the Minister of Local Government came in Parliament and said there was a ghost district. If somebody can announce a ghost district, what would be difficult by announcing a money that is not there? This was from the minister in Parliament. So, sorry, we should do due diligence. So for management, I'm really worried, but hopeful that the due process of making law applicable that governs management was thorough, all stakeholders were consulted, and the implementation is thorough. And we should also desist as leaders or persons in charge to put in personal interest. Because if you see in the public utterances, you really see like some people or some political leaders are advocating political leadership, but you see an undertone of personal interest. And if you do that, then it won't take us anywhere. Are you really doing it as a political leader mandated, or your personal interest? For example, the minister, there was a talk that the minister was advanced 10 billion shillings for a project of marketing NSSF. So you wonder whether the marketing NSSF is a political decision, or the board and the fund are systems of marketing. Or the board is the fund is also marketing NSSF, like the question you had given to Sarah to increase the threshold, or the minister is also doing it, worth 10 billion shillings. So we really need to come out clean. Otherwise, there's a lot of murky water in the NSSF. And in the end, like he said, somebody has invested, but is still there destitute. And yet the spirit behind was guaranteeing your safety catch at all age.
Okay. But then I thought with the midterm access, that issue was being addressed, because now you can have access to your money sort of midterm. You don't have to wait for... I thought the midterm access that was passed by Parliament was actually meant to address that issue. But I have to bring in...
just that. You see, that's why you keep bringing a disclaimer. That had come up. But if, for example, we had a focal person of NSSF, those issues would have come up and we wouldn't stumble over it.
Yeah, sure.
But now you come with it afterthought. But yes, there's that introduction of that legislation. And we hope it cures the mischief that had long been there. Remember, all laws are passed to address the mischief. The mischief is what we were saying. Now, if that introduction can practically work and address the mischief, then it's okay. But as I said earlier, all this could have been addressed in the preambular presentation by a board, the fund member, if a fund person, if he was here.
All right, thank you. Joseph, still on the issue of management of the fund, you have the former ED, who I think as of yesterday, court pronounced and allowed him to amend his petition in court. So you have a fund where the leader is, the former leader is in battle with the current leader. The same fund is telling us that it is growing. I don't know. Are we not reading between the lines well? Because the legal battles that NSSF finds itself in, does it allow it an ample environment to actually grow by 15%? That is one. Two is the aspect of investment. When UPC introduced this fund and this idea, what did you envisage as the credible forms of investment? I don't know, like what investment would you want to see NSSF invest in, for example?
I think on
bonds,
on the latter, I think that is possibly slightly much more technical, and I'm not quite sure whether it would necessarily have mattered for a UPC government. Nor does it, or should it matter really about any government. In terms of detail, those will be financial details. Things for the economists, things for bankers and men and women who know how to secure money, port it, and create as wealth funders and wealth fund management people. And in this case, I've got a personal interest. David is actually my cousin, David Chandijan, who I hope you said hello to him. He's in Luzira, and while I don't know much about all the details, it would almost appear that David is in prison because maybe he does not have powerful enough godfathers. Because possibly what David did, if you compare it and relate it with some of the things that have been done, including the recent political leaders, including ministers, some of the things that my brother is suggesting, maybe there would have been more people in Luzira, perhaps minus David, or all of them in there. No, I think it would be quite unreasonable for politicians or political leaders to necessarily direct that these are areas where you should or should not invest, except when it morally involves saying that, well, we should go ahead and invest our money in apartheid South Africa or in dirty money or dirty gold. Those would be morally apprehensive and politically would be quite unacceptable. So I don't think actually that's why it has ever been the issue. In fact, over the years since the creation of the fund, the issue of where the fund has been invested has not been the problem. The problem has been management of the fund and misappropriation of the money in political interventions and basically fraud. Those are basically the things. And this to me is basically political leadership. Hence, the first part of your question. This country is just sick. with Mr. Museveni at the top. You know,
That's
this country,
not true.
you know, this country is just sick with Mr. Museveni at the top. He has failed to provide political leadership. To the extent, as I said, if the former Minister of Labour, you know, who boasts of how much they tried to do to push this fund, you know, is exiled and until today is exiled. And what she has said openly and publicly and not reproduced on this program has not been disputed by Mr. Museveni or his team and or any of the people named there, nor how they instructed their lawyers. Tells you that actually what we're discussing here is merely on the top, on the surface. So clearly, I just hope that we Ugandans are able to look at the headlines of an NSSF and some of these issues through the prism and lenses of polity, that possibly now that the fund has got a new managing director, I don't know the details of the personality, that he's able to bring a sense of stability. But it's also, I think, fair, and it would be fair that the former MD, you know, who has got a case in court, gets a fair hearing, and that the matters relating to him and his allegations are disposed of. I know the courts are very much shocked. I've got a case which is nearly taking 3 years, and that also that some of the issues relating to David in prison are cleared, so that the public are able to rebuild confidence once again that this fund is not only a fund for workers, but that's a fund for which, because of its size, is not something that makes political leaders and mafias in government, you know, salivate over.
All right, Doctor, as we take a short commercial break, is 2 questions from me. Joseph speaks about political interference. I don't know, for the ordinary viewer out there, maybe we could just break it down for them to understand. What does Joseph mean when he says there's political interference with the fund? That is one. 2 is that I also want to pick your mind on the strategic investment decisions of NSSF. Is it one that you see it potentially increasing the fund? Because they seem to invest more in bonds and stock exchange. I don't know which areas are determined by, because if you read the report, Mr. Ayota talks about the inflation in Kenya and how it affected the growth of our investment. So is the fund being invested strategically in your own view?
Well, I think I will first give a comment on the issue of ghosts and NRM regime, ghost districts, ghost health centers, ghost soldiers, ghost teachers. The list
Ghost
is endless. Ghost schools, ghost recipients of PDM. 30% PDM money was given to ghost circles. So NRM operates through ghosts, and I'm surprised that the director is surprised. There's nothing new, really. Every project under NRM
just shy today.
has ghosts. So on the question of political interference, yes, NSSF has always suffered the challenges with political interference. The case of Honorable Bakoru, the case of Honorable Chandi Jama, David.
Yeah, David.
But also the saga that NSSF has been dealing with this year, with the demand by the immediate supervisor, the Minister of Gender, for a 6 billion kickback that cost Byarugaba a job.
Beta Mongi.
Yes. Yes, and then the other allegations of interference, of meddling, the back and forth about the appointment of an MD with the accusations and counter-accusations. Because the first excuse by the Minister of Gender after the board recommendation, because the Act provides that the minister will appoint an MD and deputy MD on the recommendations of the board. The board recommended renewal for both Byarugaba and Ayota. Byarugaba is 1 year younger than Ayota. Yes, yes, and the reason the minister gave is that Byargaba is too old to be appointed. Order to confirm, to confirm a
So,
person who is older.
Older than Bira.
Yes, and it's one of the grounds in court, I think.
All right.
So it is really funny. All of that is a political meddling into the fund. The controversial money for the so-called popularization of the fund. The framers of the NSSF Act and its amendments, they do not envisage a situation where a political leader,
Yes.
supervisor is demanding for a budget line. Because the political supervisor is
They're
already
paid.
facilitated
Yes,
by
they're
a
paid.
taxpayer
That's
who
their
is a
job.
saver.
Precisely, yes.
And they are not supposed to be engaged in a payable work. So when the minister asked for a budget line, the board said, no, this is unheard of. And that dragged the fund for about 8 months in controversy.
Actually, nearly a year, I think.
Yeah,
actually.
so that's why the announcement of interest amidst the 1 trillion loss and the scandals is really suspicious. It would have been good to look at the bank statement. I agree with Afanda Awich. It would have been good to look at the actual money, whatever it is. So it could have been decided to try to boost the confidence of the fund. We hope that they really made that profit, especially when we are, the backdrop of a recovering economy. Our economy is still growing, recovering from COVID, but at 3.5 rate, although the estimated recovery rate should be 5.3. So we are still not where the economy should have been. So who are the savers of this money? Amidst a recovering economy, amidst scandals after scandals that did not give confidence for new enrollment of members as it should have been, amidst abuse. Because if you look at issues like the Sorana lifestyle apartments that are actually empty, because Ugandans cannot afford them. I don't know who they built them for. I think that was really a bad investment decision.
Expatriates.
Really? Expatriates stay in hotels. We have Serena Hotel. We have Sheraton.
And then there's another hotel which cannot get customers.
Hotel. Welcome to the economy. So when you look at these issues that are happening in the economy, the struggling private sector, because as much as we have a session on the economy, it's important to know that the biggest contributors of NSSF, if actually, are in the private sector. So when you have a struggling private sector with the likes of beings losing all their businesses to bank loans, with the likes of Aya Hotel up for sale. So who is making profit to give profit to NSSF? It would be good to know that amidst all this crisis, indeed it's true. And the 1.05 trillion loss, that indeed it's true, they made profit and loss. It's really a delicate balance that needed the economy.
There's a bit of contradiction. Well, we are due for a shorter commercial break. To the viewers, just stay tuned, get yourself either a cup of coffee or a glass of water, and just stay tuned. See you shortly after this.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Hello viewers, we'll be back from that short commercial break. Well, we shall first of all just wrap up the issue of NSSF, make some 1 or 2 recommendations, then we shall shift gears into the elephant in the room, which is the economic status of our country. With inflation still, well, it has reduced, but still quite high, but also the private sector is struggling. Oh, we don't know. People have proposed that can government come out to bail out some of these big economic players, when they're in such an economic crisis, but also with an economy that has a debt burden of over 80 trillion, how wise could that be? Well, the general aspect of the economy shall take the lion's share in this phase 2 of the conversation. So let's first of all make just recommendations. What do you think needs to be done for NSSF to be a fund that we all admire and we all are proud of? So just maybe in 2 minutes, just make your recommendations, then we shall shift gears to the economy. Retired Major, I'll begin with you as I move towards Doctor.
A recommendation, I've kind of mentioned it already, but let me just in 1 minute mention about the ghost. We have had issues of ghost, but that is explainable in our, as a government or as a party, the holistic approach to corruption. We have put systems in place, the legal regimes are in place, institutions, including IGG, CID, courts of law, and others in office of the president. So I don't have time to go into it, but suffice to say that where there are ghost A, ghost B, ghost C, we have an elaborate mechanism to fight corruption, and we surely shall curb it. So that is my comment about ghost and what we do with ghost. Now, about NSSF recommendation, my recommendation is that it should function as an institution, because we are not in shortage of making good legislations, and we benchmark. If anything, Kenya wants to benchmark from us on NSSF. So if only we could allow this institution of NSSF to function as an institution without interference, without personal interest. We have talked about patriotism, and I believe some of the cadres in there have been to Chankwanza at one time or another. So the recommendation for me is for all stakeholders to make NSSF as an institution run on an institutional routine framework, and we see it flourishing.
But, okay, I want to just end with one thing with you, Retired Major, and the issue of corruption that you've just mentioned. I don't know, because if I'm to just think about what, for example, Justice Katutsi said some time back, is that he's tired of trying the small fish. He wants us to begin trying the big fish and the guys who are the biggest beneficiaries of corruption. Now that you've brought it up, I don't know, because it has become a song. We sing about corruption, year in, year out, day in, day out. But is the political will there from the NRM to address corruption?
Political will is there. How do I say it is there? In all the major forums of NRM, from Central Executive Committee to National Executive Committee to National Conference, including today as I came. By the way, I sacrificed attending a caucus meeting in State House because I had to be here to share views with the citizens. So even including the caucus, that one is ongoing as we talk here. The political will has always been expressed. And this is an in-house expression. So if it is in an organ of the party and the pronouncement is made again and again, then how else would I not assess that there's a political will? Two, the formation of instruments, the formation of organs, the formation of which is meant to combat is there. Because if such a statement is made to indicate political will at Central Executive Committee and a proper body is put in place, then I would add the two to say there's political will. But if I'm in SEC and the chairman or members are talking in tongues and we come out to say we have the political will, then I would tell you there's no political will. So in a very demonstrated way, there is political will.
Okay. Joseph, your recommendations, but of course I see you want to make a comment on on corruption.
No, I think the idea that there is a political will to deal with corruption, when corruption is the middle name of NRM, is
NRM, where is corruption there?
No, it's
NRA, where is it in the middle?
NRM, your middle name is actually Mr. Corruption. But look, no, there is no political will. This thing comes from the top. I was telling a group of young people I was meeting with yesterday evening that just look at what Magufuli managed to do in Tanzania. That this guy came from nowhere and banged the table. Tanzania, again, I was telling these young East Africans that the original East Africa was Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And by the way, as we were growing up, Moses, before you were born, as you acknowledged, Tanzania was actually the country that we psychologically looked down upon in fashion and everything else and everything else and everything else. But as we talk today, Magufuli comes up and bangs the table. Tanzania changes. Now this woman comes, without prejudice, a Muslim woman, come in her own way. Do you know what? Tanzania is roaring ahead, projects after projects after projects. In fact, last week there was a report about one of their sovereign funds, and sort of doubling in its value. I think they're talking about 2.2 trillion, billion, US dollars in a year, things like that. These guys are moving ahead. Why? Because of clear leadership provided by Magufuli that kills into the culture of corruption. Once it comes from the top, you and I, as day-to-day citizens, simply say that, well, this is the new way in which the country is going. No, it is not from here. As I said, that a minister is in exile because of NSSF. I'll stick to that. That a minister, an NRA minister, is in exile, and Mr. Museveni, has not responded to it. Since you're boasting about SEC, next time you're in SEC, please raise this to Mr. Museveni. Say, why is a decent Ugandan citizen from West Nile, which West Nile will deny them electricity thus far, why is she in exile all these years? And she's alleging that NSSF money that the UPCs founded for all our peoples, including you, Mr. Museveni, why is it that she's in exile? So no, this thing needs political leadership from the top, and I do not see political will. The manner in which it was handled in the last 12 months, as Sarah is talking about, if you see how Beta Mongi, you see how Biarugaba, you see how the sweep from Minister of Finance, between Minister of Finance and Minister of Gender, playing around with it. My young brother in prison. It's an absolute mess, meaning just managing one fund. You can move on from there. You go to the Luboa projects, you go to the Temangalo projects, you can go on and on and on. No political will. Quick though, in terms of conclusion, really. So that is a no-go area. But that said, we just hope that political leaders in this country, most of whom have looted this country for 40 years, they've had a huge amount of money. They should actually give Ugandans a breather so that they let NSSF be NSSF for what it is, move their hands away and allow these funds to do what it was originally founded to do. And that for the leaders and management of the fund, I agree with Comrade Awich, the new and the leaders and managers of the fund wake up, also take a bit of responsibility, conscientize themselves and begin to not only manage this fund and grow this fund on behalf of the regional stakeholders, but to do so responsibly, knowing that they also have responsibility as a privileged fund and to engage in corporate social responsibility, meaning therefore that they should not be setting and building properties for investors, NRA's investors, but rather for all the citizens of Uganda, including some of the grandchildren of the regional founders founders of this fund.
All right, thank you. Doctor, do you want to make a comment about
just
corruption?
Yes, for me, if anybody is still looking for NRM's political will to fight corruption, I think I shouldn't look far. Just to look at Karamoja Saga, Iron Sheet Saga. First of all, you have 24 ministers involved in hardware stealing.
Hardware stealing.
And then you have a helpless
have a language
of SEC. A helpless chair of SEC that cannot take action. What kind of lies are there now to deceive Ugandans? I'm sure that even the 3 cases before court will be dropped because of the way they are going. applications, mismanagement, what? Before you know it, they will be out of court.
Because I think even the...
For me, that
the
defines the total absence of political will
leadership
and
and leadership.
inability to take action on corruption by President Museveni.
How about comments like, you know, they are investing in the country, so we should...
So even Mabat was for investing.
No, I
Where,
mean lifestyle
I know.
audit. The lifestyle audit.
Of course, the president. I know. But were they also, is he scared of fighting for
I think the lifestyle audit should not be misplaced. The IGG, the IGG
That is
wanted...
even more emphatic.
No, the IGG was saying, if you earn this amount of money and your expenditure is more than this, then it should be investigated.
Explain your extra income.
Now, the president said,
Don't go there.
for now, he was not saying forever. He was saying
He said, don't scare the money.
He said
These people
there's
are
a way we are
investing in
handling it,
shopping
because if you
malls.
do it without that safety catch, they'll carry it away.
Which one is that?
No,
So
but
there's still a procedure being worked to make sure that if you do that, they don't run out with the money. You don't run out
in
with the money.
addition to that, the president wrote a directive stopping IGG from enforcing declarations on the army.
On the synopsis, yes.
Yes. In
Now, senior
violation.
officers are doing it now.
But why did he write?
Through
Because,
CMI.
as I said, we wanted to be a mechanism of
No,
doing
okay, anyway.
They are
For
doing
me,
it now
my
through
comment
it. Now it is being done.
Through CMI.
For me, my comment is CMI part of IGG? That's also
Is
another abuse. Is that their mandate?
Is that
To
the
handle
mandate?
incomes. Do they have capacity? Do they have mechanisms? That's another abuse.
No, it
of
is an agreed
institutions.
procedure.
By
But
who?
it's an
By who?
abuse.
It's an
And
abuse.
it finally gets to IGG.
Afanda which laws are made by parliament. If you want to put ad hoc processes in place, go back to parliament and amend the IGG Act and put that provision. For now, it is an illegality.
No, but they're doing it in consonance with the law.
It
Have you
does-
checked the provision?
I know. Does it provide that CMI can now verify people's incomes?
I think there's a discretion.
CMI is not even mentioned in the UPDF Act.
There's a discretion which gives the IGG how to proceed. So they can have the flexibility to say, okay, we want to get this declaration. Can Mr. Ochieno get it for us? So that is a discretion.
So what
the
was
levy
it?
that
Was
is
it
given.
a decision by the IGG or
Yeah, it was
What law establishes CMI?
By the IGG.
What law establishes CMI?
CMI is under Armed Forces Act, the NRA Act, or UPDF Act.
typical NRA?
It was actually NRA Act passed by
Yeah,
Tinyefuza.
it is NRA, yes.
No, Sarah, there is an
It
act which
was
was
repealed.
It was NRA Act which was actually graduated by UPDF Act. No. This is the thing.
Yes, I know, but
An
it was
NRA Act was passed. You know, you were not in
was
this country.
repealed.
When
You had exiled people who had
when
exposed you guys.
Tinyefuza was the minister. And one thing I can remind you is that in that act, so many penalties were for death. And people say, hey, you have brought a law where half of the law is about death. Now, later on, that was before the 95 Constitution. Then the army was called NRA. Now, after 95 Constitution, when the army became UPDF under the new Constitution, the law changed. So it basically changed the name. But for citation, we can cite UPDF
You cannot,
Act.
yes, but so when you say NRA Act, you are referring to.
I wanted to
repeal
give
that.
its originality.
Anyway,
Okay. Yeah,
so
but-
my comment on NSSF is that we need to remove politics from NSSF. NSSF is a fund that should be clearly run by professionals with no interference of the politics. So unless we deal with ejecting politics out of NSSF, scandals at NSSF will never end because they are caused by politicians.
In 30 seconds, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
It's just a plea to the NSSF bosses, new and mid-ranking, that may it happen that from now henceforth, nobody dies miserable because of failure to get their money or because their money have become ghosts, but particularly because of bureaucracy of not getting their money, they die miserable leaving behind their money. I'm asking, this thing needs to be mainstreamed I think this thing also needs to be widely politicized in the sense of responsibility.
Is it still happening?
It's happening. It's happening.
Oh my
I know
God.
people who are waiting for money and they can't access their money. And I also know people whose names have been changed.
We need,
and I also,
we need
you know,
publications.
no, by all means. And I'm actually quite happy to be able to pick it up. And I was actually hoping that maybe some of these guys would be. It's actually a scandal.
Very unfortunate. So is it the bureaucracy of the process that is too long?
Corruption and both.
There's a lot of internal syndicates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, quite unfortunate, those allegations. Retired Major, let's shift gears now to the bigger picture, which is the economy and how it is looking. Just last week, the country was shocked by the news about the foreclosure of Pearl of Africa. Not so long ago, the Supreme Court took a decision on the Ham Chugundu versus TD Diamond Trust Bank case, and one of our biggest investors is highly indebted. So that is just one or two cases of how many Ugandans out there are struggling to sustain their businesses. With the inflation rate continuing to go high, fuel prices, I think currently a litre goes for around 5,400. That's at Shell, and Total it is slightly above that. So, and that has in tandem affected the price of commodities like food, sugar, among other things. Where are we heading to, Retired Major, with this economy?
Well, Sarah is always very able on economy. I wonder why you didn't give her the first chance. But anyhow,
You are a duty bearer here. That's why.
let me answer. First of all, I'm not so sure whether it is right to use the indicators of the collapsing two institutions as a measure of the indicator of a good or a bad economy.
The private sector, I think they
Because
have representation.
there are many factors that lead to a collapse of a venture. Sometimes it's misappropriation. You put your cousin there, the business is doing well, but your cousin steals the money. Or you put a professional accountant there who is well qualified from a university, but he steals the money. On the contrary, I think they are indicators of good economy, and always good or bad, challenges or not, which are given by Bank of Uganda or UBOS. And I think the indicators thereabout, it's good. In fact, in the region, we are better off in terms of inflation. We have had a very relatively stable inflation. The dollars has remained 3.7 something around there for a long, long time. A dollar to Uganda shillings. We have food in the market and people can afford it.
Expensive.
There
food.
was a time when fuel shot up to about 8,000. And it was in this same panel that people said Kenya had the intervention, which country had intervention, Museveni should also intervene. And again, like today, caucus meeting is going on. In the caucus in Kololo, the president said we shouldn't intervene in fuel. It will come down.
Do we still have fuel reserves, Retired Major?
Yes, we do. It came back from 8,000 to 4,000 something. You remember? When there was cry all over, oh, Kenya has done it, please, Uganda should also intervene, should put subsidies on fuel and what? The president stuck to his gun and said, this would be artificial. If you start picking from the reserves to subsidize on fuel, it will be artificial, cosmetic, and it will lose more.
So
he said, leave it. Now, that should be an indicator of a good economy.
But
that fuel could come down by itself to 4,000, almost a half. Okay? So there are other indicators. So I wouldn't like to say that a collapsing venture is an indication of a bad economy, because there are more factors to that. There's corruption. Money comes in, business are running, they steal the money. Okay?
Okay, how about factors like access to social services, like education, like food in itself? the price of food has gone high.
It has not gone very high.
Gradually, it is increasing gradually.
Okay, we have maybe we have data to Ubers that could speak to avoid my imagination or to the market that I go to. Maybe my market would be cheap. I think there's an independent data. So we needed, Sarah always likes statistics.
I have some.
And I would like to read it myself, because you can read something else. You can read something else. So, economy is fairly doing well. According to Ministry of Finance, according to Bank of Uganda, we are doing well. We are recovering from COVID, a global COVID pandemic, okay? But the economy is doing well, and that is in the short term. But I've always said, but this is a long term to assess, but I've always said that all the factors said and done, all the figures raised pro and against, it must come to the welfare. And the welfare may not be determined by how you go to Anjenoa to dance and you are happy, but it's finally decided that you have a longer life expectancy and happiness. By the way, an independent research, you can check with Google, indicates that Uganda is the happiest in the region, once again.
Because of alcohol.
I think Sarah doesn't dispute that. So if we are living longer on earth, we are not dying, and we are happy, then figures are there to go about by. Because even if we read very brilliant figure that inflation has come to zero, okay, that per capita income has gone to what, and we are dying, and we are not happy, then what is the use of figures? So, all said is that Bank of Uganda, Uganda Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Finance still keep giving a good image that the economy is doing well. They can also highlight for us, often they have done it, challenges thereabout, and warning to make us, consumers and citizens, take care. But over and above, we are doing well, we are living longer and happier. We are happier than Kenya, we are happier than Uganda, Tanzania, we are happier than Rwanda, we are happier than Burundi. And that is an independent study, not a Uganda government survey.
Okay, well, fair enough. Joseph, still on the economy, is that we are discussing how it looks currently, but I want to try and correlate the economy as it stands with the statement that the Vice President made in New York while she was addressing the General Assembly, and she was trying to lure international financial institutions like World Bank and IMF I don't know, actually World Bank in this case, to review their decision of stopping their funding to Uganda. So with an already very high debt burden as a country, we are still looking forward to getting more loans. But also, I don't know, it's just a cocktail of so many issues, but the economy as it stands, does it speak to the ordinary Ugandan in Agongera there?
Certainly not in Agongera. I'm 100% definite and sure it's not in Atiak. I was in Mvura in West Nile, and I was in Arua of West Nile, and I was in Nebi of West Nile, and I was in Pakwach of West Nile. It absolutely does not speak to them. And by the way,
it is abject poverty.
As a matter of interest, I also was in the oil city of Hoima. You know, the oil of the people of Uganda that Mr. Museveni calls his oil. And I was also in Bulisa. Beyond the roads, you know, you don't have to be an economist to be able to tell what really the real and critical situations are there. But on this part of, as Comrade Awich had said, that the person with the textbook on the lap is Berenyanje's Dr. Bireete. And so She'll have the figures. But look, no, I think that talking about what was at the World Bank, I will talk about the simple economics of it. That for a struggling economy in which we are begging World Bank to review how to come back and keep us going afloat, that Mr. Museveni's assistant, is the one you're saying, yeah? That his assistant goes to New York and their delegation is full of 71 people, some of whom are bag carriers, yeah? Tells you that there is something so fundamentally wrong with this country that it's rather cheeky. That they spent 2 billion Uganda shillings on a trip to New York that include a delegation including 71 people. What were those people going to do in New York?
Were they technocrats?
No.
Maybe.
Were they technocrats? And how many advisors does Museveni's assistant need? How many advisors does Museveni's prime minister need? And advisors on what? Surely. When they can't advise and manage NSSF, which we founded for them and said it was already rolling and running. So advisors for actually at the UN session. Interestingly, actually, I would have liked to have seen maybe 3 people as climate activists being part of the delegation rather than funny bag carriers, including, no. Look, it is on inflation, it's on employment, it's on general cost of living. Comrade Awich is trying to fudge figures about government interventions on fuel price, on fuel. No, the fact that Museveni did not intervene to cushion the ordinary citizens and the whole thing did a turnaround does not make it right. Governments all over the world cushioned their citizens in hard times and hard economic times. Governments from the left of politics to the most capitalist right-wing governments, they do intervene and they do that. Governments are parents of households. Governments are parents of households, and so it's absolutely their responsibility. And with the performance of this government, would want to put it in this way, that how many jobs have been created in the last 12 months, for example, or how many jobs have been plowed into the economy since Museveni found his way through Chagulanyi in 2021. What is the state of our public services, hospitals, schools? What is the state of our agricultural sector? What is the state of our infrastructure? A walk from Pakwach to Arua, I came back with my back paining, on the road. In between, thanks to corruption thing, there's a road that I found 3 years ago being worked on between Pakwach and Nebi. Half of it has been done, and you wonder where the contractors have gone. All these are dirty things. I was talking to a senior economist from West Nile 2 evenings ago, and this is a retired gentleman, and simply saying he's almost giving up hope for a possibility that there may be any miracle from NRA basically to cushion the lives and livelihoods of the people in our country. Like Sarah said, and partly actually Comrade Awich, when he was saying something about which I absolutely agree with them, that these things are not about the index, these things are not about the percentages, say economic growth at 6% to 5.5%. What is the reality in the pockets of the people? What's the reality in terms of people's wages? What's the reality, in terms of people's ability to afford to live? Even as I sit with you here, as we have conversations, I have had actually 2 messages, on one of which is about somebody who wants to be helped with a basic medical bill. If you cannot, a regime cannot afford to maintain a UPC-built hospital, basically with merely drugs. They forget about just paint washing it. What is it doing? So we can talk about the health economy for Sudhir, health economy for the other hotel that is it part of Africa? I don't know the names, because the other day I think Comrade which abused me that I can't afford to go to those places. So what really is it? No, I would say that it's very unfortunate that this is a regime that did not come in to serve the welfare of our people. So we have a false economy operating, and whatever's happening in this country is simply by accident. We are just lucky as the Republic of Uganda because our weathers are good, although from now the rains are all becoming uncertain as the guys who came from the bushes. So, but beyond that, people are able to feed themselves relatively better than people in Kenya. Ugandans are generally actually quite industrious. And sometimes when you get out in the evening and you go to some of these trading centers, whether it's in Chireka, in the particular shopping mall corners of Fontinda, or Chibuli, or Zambia, you find ordinary citizens, hustling, but very genuinely focused into their own things because they know that the role of governance has been outsourced long time ago to God. So people basically just struggle. So by accident, people go ahead and money the following day, and Mr. Museveni just bossed for the results.
Okay, fair enough. Doctor, I am coming to you. And I agree, the resilience of Ugandans, I think, has to me checked the box a long time ago. Like, Ugandans will work very hard, they are so resilient. So the government needs to support them one way or the other. Doctor, as we speak about the economy, just last week I was talking to my mother and she was asking me if I could help her buy fertilizers for her rice in the garden. And I couldn't imagine how expensive these things are. So I don't know, is government having the proper interventions to, for example, enable farmers, to enable the private sector, to enable businessmen to keep their businesses afloat? I don't know, because we have the parish development model, all these things, but how is the economy looking in your own words?
Well, I think government, and I don't understand why, government always looks at the economy. And I mean NRM government. And maybe to remind the viewers that I don't know any other government in my lifetime. I know NRM government. So to remind the viewers that the NRM government looks at the economy like the way the dog looks at the dead cow. They are just looking at what piece to eat. They don't bother with feeding the cow or fattening it even for market day. It's just that mentality. I know that we've won the AFCON bid. I'm sure people are already dividing tenders among themselves. They corrupt Kidega. The way they did with Chogam, or the way they are doing with the G77 meeting that is coming in early next year. So you have that mentality of leadership.
Non-allied
Yes.
movement?
As far as the economy is concerned, they live one day at a time. They are not building a national economy. And I can demonstrate that. Look at the interventions. And they are endless. But what are their results? They will put up Rubowa Hospital. Just last week, they arrested the journalist for following up on taxpayers' money. They will put up, everything is a deal. The deal, who has a commission, who has brought to this, also me, this is my thing. So they will bring Rubowa Hospital. They will bring Pineti. They will bring Temangaro. They will bring the fake vaccine man. They will bring individuals and put them in a budget. Like, which country does that? That you have individual names in a national budget. And these are not institutions.
Like who?
Like Rabob. So the perception of this government is that of a dog just looking at what piece of a dead cow to pick. They will put up, of course, for public relation sake, like PDM. Then you will get 1 year of PDM, 30% money distributed to ghosts. 30%. And then we are digitalizing, the speeches will be there. But how do you distribute 30% of PDM money to ghost circles? Like how? They will bring the money we gave for local industries. Roko applies for 90 billion. But by the time Parliament approved, it was above 200. So how did it grow? Are they charging commission for approval? And this, of course, I'm not saying that Roko was justified to take taxpayers' money. Look at Sudir. During Chogam, We bought 49% shares in Munyonyo, Commonwealth. The shares disappeared. I'm sure individuals grabbed those shares, but we continue to give money to Sudir. So what other mentality do we have other than that of a dog looking at a dead cow in terms of the economy? So a national economy grows only when you invest in it. Economy is a cycle. Invest in economy, improve household incomes, everybody pays tax, and government can offer services. They have money to offer services which are for the common good. So once you break this cycle, that for you are only waiting at the end point to grab and run. And unfortunately, we are stuck with this mentality for 40 years. I know that Ugandans, through their hard efforts, have succeeded. Nothing like, it's unfortunate to see like beings, being advertised. A very hardworking. These are the people who deserve bailouts. Very hardworking citizens, employing Ugandans, paying taxes, and you see all of a sudden, first the newspaper headline, they are up for auction. Look at Ataya Hotel. Aya Hotel was among the so-called praised Chogam hotels, including how we lost the greatest primary school, Shimon demonstration, where we now have a shopping mall. Imagine such a decision, that a country can afford to lose the best primary school in the country and replace it with a mere shopping mall because of corruption, because of a dead cow mentality looked at by a dog. You destroy Shimon demonstration school. Why was Shimon demonstration school important for the bigger growth of a cycle? All civil servants were taking their children to that school.
Yeah.
It was convenient.
That was the idea, yes.
You on the way coming to work, all ministries are there in the state center. You drop your child, you walk to your office. You leave office, you pick your child and you go home. And you destroy that school in the name of building hotels for Chogam. 5 years down the road, Sudir is putting a fake shopping mall in the school. If the hotel failed, why can't we rebuild the school back to do its purpose? To serve the hinterland of the middle income population that is paying the highest contribution to the national income. So this mentality cannot enable Uganda to break through because it is a cycle.
Retired Major, should I ask a question or there is sufficient concerns to respond to?
You ask.
Okay. Yeah, as just to put it out there is that I agree that government is the biggest, first of all, spender. I read a report where government in domestic areas, where government has procured services from service providers domestically to a tune of 1.2 trillion that we have not paid back. So government is holding money of private individuals out there. 1.2 trillion. It is a report out there. So I don't know, is because I believe that the private sector must be able to work. But are we doing enough to support the private sector? Are we doing enough? Is Uganda Development Bank offering, access to soft credit? I don't know, but the private sector, Retired Major.
Okay. You had asked me whether you should ask a question or I have enough to reply. But let me reply something before your question. The congressman seems to think that good things are happening by accident.
Yes.
Individual effort.
Not at all.
Thought you said Retired Major.
Nothing happens by accident. Everything that is happening is in a framework of things. We are living in a well-governed country. We are not living in a statelessness. We are not living in a failed state. We are living in a country governed by the constitution with a president with the three arms of government working. Everything is planned for.
So is it form versus
Now,
substance?
We have a tendency of saying when it goes wrong, then it is a design by government. When it goes right, it is an accident. Should it go wrong, it is government. Should it go right, it is an accident. No. Everything is in the framework of government. It is planned for. If government pulled out and there's anarchy, you won't see anything. So what the congressman is saying, that good things are happening by accident, no. Only that you don't illustrate to the nitty-gritty. But the overall framework, for example, the stability, the law applicable, the budget there too, and all these systems, law and order, is what makes things happen the way they are, not by accident. So I repeat, that is not good for us to say when it goes wrong, that is government. When it goes right, that's it, accident. No. So everything is planned, everything is managed. There's a good management of the country, and that is where we are, the way we are. And that is why we come here, discuss here, greet each other with the Congress, greet each other with my lady of Bweranyanje, who is seemingly hostile, but we are happy. Not an accident. That is a design by government to have freedom of media, to have freedom of speech, to discuss within the law. That is not an accident.
Corruption, incompetence.
Okay, but corruption and incompetence, that is government. That is government. The good ones, that is accident. No, that is not how it works. Now, on the private sector, say help from government or motivation, is that first of all, there's the overall infrastructure provided, the peace and security. Then you have the economic interventions. In terms of economic policy, okay, the economic policy itself, to say, to grant that private sector framework, it's not by itself, it is granted by government economic policy to say our development should be private sector led. That is a policy itself, and it is set in motion. Now, there are other interventions that is given, of course, like the banks, which are supposed to, the private sector is supposed to get money from, like some tax holidays that is supposed to be given if there is, like now there's uniformity in tax, in investment and taxation. The other day, Attorney General read, because the idea was that it's only foreigners who are benefiting from tax holiday. But I think the law now puts a threshold that should you, whether you're Ugandan or not, put this amount of money, then the law is invoked. So a lot has been done in place from the framework of peace and security, because you won't even do private sector when guns are being shot here, when people are sleeping outside, when there's dead bodies on the street. You won't do that. So the first and paramount aspect is the overall governing of the society, that there's law and order, there's peace. Even foreign investors, they will want to know whether courts actually work, if they're going to get remedies in court, and investment courts and investment institutions. So let us not look at government effort on private investment in and out. It can be in tax policy, which now tax policy has been uniformed for both foreign and local. It can be in terms of where they can go to get funds for investment, Uganda Development Bank, or East African or African Development Bank, whatever it is. It is also in terms of the government, as you said, strengthening the population with the purchasing power. So it's a circle. But all said and done, you could still have an independent observer, like World Bank or IMF, to tell you how a private sector-led development in Uganda is. I'm sure they have grading. So we could just check ourselves vis-a-vis other countries in the area, Kenya, South Sudan, or Congo, or whatever. But I think we are not doing badly, because some of us even think we are over private sector led, because we even think there are things that should have been maintained. For example, electricity. We do not think that, some of us think that even electricity should have been put in the mainstream of private sector. Things like water, things like health. Some of us think we have over private sector led development. So we have tried, and a lot is being done. Only that we only seem to see when there's a wrong. So when it moves in a routine and peace, we don't see it. But that is of course we need to do more, but we are not badly off in private sector led.
All right, Joseph.
Yes, sir.
The perfect excuse in the past has been the war in Ukraine that has affected the global supply chains and things like that.
That song, yes.
I don't know. At this point in time, can we still put blame to Russia, Ukraine,
No, we can't.
or other global factors that you may know of?
Oh, no, we can't. And countries like Ethiopia, amazingly, just immediately after the war in Ukraine started, they started considering some of their domestic remedies by investing particular sectors of their agriculture, including on their grains and grain boosts. And as I understand it, I don't have the latest figures, but they're looking towards gaining their independence. Apparently, even struggling Zimbabwe did something to that effect. So no, we can't. Actually, very interestingly, I actually don't know what really the explanation right now is on the sudden rise again on oil prices. And again, usually, although Comrade Awich says we shouldn't do comparisons, there is no reason why we should be having these excess price differentials with Kenya. Understandably, we could argue that Kenya is our immediate neighbors, but then what about Rwanda? What about South Sudan? These are guys who are farther, and indeed they are Congo, but particularly Kenya and Rwanda and South Sudan. These are countries which are much more inland, and in many cases, transportation costs, is higher coming from indeed the costs. But that said, I'm pleased to hear that Comrade Awich, at last, although it's a painful 40 years, is suggesting that he's willing to begin to agree with the UPC that it was actually criminal that NRA privatized our public utilities, our water, our electricity, our transportation, and indeed all the other key major public sectors. Actually, for water, basically, as a matter of correction, actually water was not privatized. And amazingly, water, again, the things founded by us as UPC and National Water Sewerage Corporation seems to be doing very well. So there was absolutely no reason to do that. But that said, what government really should be doing and should have done is really to create an enabling environment in which, in this case, private businesses thrive. But when you do it in an environment in Uganda in which regulation is neither here nor there, when you do it in a manner in which it's difficult to do business, when you do it in which you can't guarantee. I've got somebody, a relative actually with me right now, who's actually trying to follow up a particular business thing, and I don't want to go into too much detail. And this guy is resident outside the country, is shocked by the frustrations of now going to 3 offices in 2 weeks, and even a phone call that he got the other day that and being promised that he will be called back, has not been called back. These are things that possibly here in Rwanda you go cruise on your laptop and put 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and by evening you're sorted. So no, that is why the reasons why Sarah and I continue and to repeat the fact that many of the things that happen in this country happen partly by accident and partly because of the resilience and patience of the citizens of this country that Mr. Museveni has now used and exploited. It's really the case that if this country, this economy was well managed, Uganda would be amongst the top performing economies in the world. And if you see what we did in the 80s and the 60s particularly, and what we were able to do in the early part, within about 3 years of about a two government, this country, with our wealth and our resources, and particularly including our human resources, capacity, it would be a substantially transformed economy on the African continent. We still have a chance to do so, but except I just don't believe that is ever going to be happened under NRM because Mr. Museveni is tired, and his experimental thing of one morning a Marxist, another morning he's an agent for the IMF and World Bank, and when it's not convenient for him, he's able to give them abuses. And when we all know that had it not been for IMF and World Bank, he would not have been around all this time, which is really, really a shame. But we're discussing economics, and the economy. We just want to put pressure on them again to say that, look, please begin to review how you spend our money. Stop putting Odrek Rabuoko on your budget. Begin to respect our national compass. Stop putting Odrek. Start emphasizing how you're going to invest in our rural economies. Start reviewing how you're going to invest on Karamoja, away from the hard crime of sorry, how did you call it again, please?
High evidence of lack of political will. Fight corruption.
No, it is not too late for them, even as they prepare themselves to exit, to do these things for Uganda. There's a huge amount of goodwill
Don't you
amongst
think
Ugandans.
it's too late? The president stopped at threatening, I will not have that. Take action. So what happened? Can you pass him his letter again and he reads on Karamoja iron sheet?
Please.
Okay.
You know, we have had a promise that Comrade Awich is going to convey a message to his entire colleague, and that coming from this, and then the Comrade Awich is going to give us a feedback.
On what?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Doctor, we have 5 minutes to be out of this place. But my last question to you before I pick parting shots is on the aspect of domestic resource mobilization and how best can we generate revenue internally first before we can even begin to think about other alternatives like borrowing and etc. URA has a target. The issues around tax administration. I don't know, is 29 trillion achievable for this financial year that is that has just
I think the year
started,
we are coming from, URA had a shortfall. And so can URA meet its target with the collapsing private sector? So for example, you cut out beans tax, cut out air tax, and so many other people that don't make it to the newspapers. When you open the property pages, people's properties are auctioned daily. And this is, I know that the Bank of Uganda has lowered the central bank rate from 10 to 9.5%, hoping to ease the pressures on the borrowing rates and then stimulate growth. But what is the reality on the ground? When you buy newspapers, actually it's more convenient to read newspapers online because you don't go through the stress, the distress of the economy.
All those very many headlines that you see,
find like 4 pages of properties to be auctioned every day. Whose properties are those? And what is the contribution of these properties in the tax or the absence of that contribution? When you look at the private sector collapsing, that indicates loss of jobs because private sector is the biggest employer. Loss of jobs. Once you lose jobs, it's a whole chain. Not only income houses are losing incomes, but you're losing a tax base because that is pay gone. So when you look at since the suspension of the World Bank support, the announcement, our dollar shilling value has been depreciating slowly from 3,600 something. We are now approaching 3,800. We are 3,779. Today's posted rate by Bank of Uganda. So the shilling is losing value gradually. Kenya is in a crisis due to cost of foreign exchange. Finding dollars in Kenya now is hard. I saw an announcement on Tanzania foreign reserves. Our reserves there. There was a discussion on fuel and saying we can't mitigate, those are short term. But Parliament had established in the last inquiry that we have zero fuel reserves. Did we create them? All the reserves in Jinja were empty. So even when we were saying it is ideal to intervene, even as government tried to put a bold face, I think we missed an opportunity of checking on those tanks again? Is there anything, or they are still empty, as Parliament established? We have a situation of depleting foreign reserve, our national reserves in Bank of Uganda since 2019. We've gone more than half. We have debts maturing in 2025. Do we have money to pay? So that for me, this is the state of the economy that we must discuss. I know that Parliament has been calling for supplementary budgets, but people have, the popular rumor is that even now to spend money from the treasury, you first call to place a call to the fountain of honor. Should we spend? Should we pay salary? Should we? And for him, his priority is security. When you look at the wastage of the UN General Assembly meeting, the 2 billion spent on 2 parallel delegations could have built 4 health centers, could have built 4 seed schools, could have paid 3,700 primary school teachers. Then you have on one hand political leaders posturing and telling citizens to be frugal as they send the millions of delegations to useless meetings where there is no income to be earned. So that mismatch by the political leadership cannot put us in a better place. And then I think Kwame Nkrumah had a point when he said, seek ye first the political kingdom. He thought the political leadership would then revive the economic empowerment of the African people. But the reverse is true, where you have bad leadership.
All right, our time is fast spent. Retired Major and everyone else, I'll give you just 60 seconds, and I'll be very strict.
Yeah, 60
just give us parting
seconds.
shots.
I have 1-2 comments to make. On the question of exit, we are not about to exit. We are here by the will of the people, and we shall repeatedly, every 5 years, consult the people through a vote. If the people wish, we go. If they
Renew
don't,
your mandate.
we stay. On the contrary, last Thursday I was on front line, and Besje was on NBS. Besje was on by
On Zoom.
phone call. Besje seemed to indicate that the general feeling is that other parties have given up. They're just negotiating with us on what we can give them. So, Congressman.
And what did you give them?
Congressman, we are not about to exit. It is the people to make us exit. Collapsing properties, I repeat that collapsing properties is not a sole indicator of bad economy. See at this bus called Gaga. Gaga, we're even going up to Burundi, up to Nairobi. People were paying Gaga. Gaga was not going empty, not a single time. And they were not even getting a lot of accidents. But Gaga collapsed. Why? Because people steal the money. So, it is not enough. Now, my parting shot is, we have discussed NSSF and the state of the economy. On NSSF, we still continue the prayer that we beg all stakeholders that let the fund run independently and professionally so that it achieves its objectives. On the economy, the party had a manifesto which has been given to government to implement, and we wait the feedback from government to the party, but we have tasked government to meet the targets that we set out with the people in our manifesto. And the slight indication we have is that Ugandans, the economy is still doing well. Ugandans are living longer. The life expectancy is 60 now from 45, and we are happiest people in East Africa. The struggle continues.
Joseph, in 60 seconds.
Ugandans never voted Mr. Museveni in. There is no evidence since Mr. Museveni came in 1986 that Ugandans have been clapping for him returning to State House. Granted, Ugandans received Mr. Museveni with a lukewarm caution, thanks to the mess in which Museveni and DP and others had created post-1985. That Mr. Museveni has maintained himself in power militarily is not in dispute, but it's a subject we shall come back to. So when we are talking about when this guy is about to leave, and Awich gives almost a sweeping thing that we are not about to leave, it's almost as if it's some kind of entitlement. And so that tells you really about the
Subject to
tone.
consulting the people.
Can you imagine consulting? So
Through election.
those are nuances. I know it basically means election, but you can actually see what it means. But no, I hope that at some stage soon we're able to have a conversation of a post-Museveni Uganda, which is actually genuinely post-Museveni Uganda, in which you're able to have a new direction, a new conversation involving all Ugandans, including people in the NRA, but one in which Ugandans begin to seek an attempt to experiment with an alternative way beyond NRA, because NRA has already flopped, but failed. But that said, no, at the back of everything else, you know, the welfare and well-being of the citizen of this country is going to be determined by people's ability to take their children to school. I know yesterday I got two phone calls. Some people think I actually have money. 2 phone calls over school fees. I know one person who was nearly, a relative, who was extremely sad that he's got a candidate in primary 7 and a candidate in senior 4 and is struggling for both. Those are the real index. The index about people's inability to pay for health services, one, because they can't access public health facilities, but then 2, they can't actually go ahead and buy medicine. Again, I have those ones, and I have those ones in real terms. And then the people who are struggling to eat. As of this morning, in my own home in Nagongera, I got a phone call. People who are looking for, food. But this is in Nagongera. That is from Nagongera. That's what we talk about. Yes, So these things are real. So while we actually talk headlines, because sometimes we can get carried away by almost, you can, possibly almost like many point scoring, but talk about the top bit of it. That really is the economic reality. But also, people who cannot travel from Nagongera to Tororo because they can't afford a border or to jump on a taxi. Those are the realities. But beyond that, whatever we say, it is also the very, very many young graduates, many of whom are now my new members in Uganda People's Congress. People who graduated 5 years ago and they don't have jobs, Moses. People who graduated 3 years ago and they don't have jobs. And people who graduated last year and they do not have jobs. I think that is the mark of the state of our economy. And also, regardless of whatever it is, if government cannot
provide,
now
cutting short, right?
If government cannot provide for that, then that government has failed, and that government should be packing bags.
Thank you, Doctor. In 60 seconds, parting shots.
Okay, for me, really the state of the economy is the actual status of governance in a country. If you have people who are sleeping hungry, you have parents who can't educate their children, you have people who cannot access medical care, that's an indicator of failure of the political leadership. Because the political leadership must work towards the betterment of the people. And that betterment of the people is through social security, through economy, through safeguards on the lifestyle that we are celebrating. But my parting shot, finally, I hope I'm still in my 1 minute, is on the AFCON. I saw the exchanges on social media and people outside East Africa and making fun of us. First is to congratulate the Pamoja bid for winning. I hope that they can meet because we still have standards to meet. I hope that the Pamoja bid can meet the standards and actually get host to the bid. But beyond that, the comments outside East Africa were that Kenya is happily jubilating and counting their money to the bank because they have the stadiums, they have the hotels, they have the roads and airports. Tanzania is halfway celebrating because they also have the facilities. For Uganda, we have to build the stadiums, we have to fix Kampala roads, we have to fix all the nasty roads leading to the hosting places, we have the airport to build. So we have a lot of work to do. Amidst the struggling economy, shall we borrow the money? Shall we get the money? Shall we go to the neighbors to watch the matches because we can't host them? I think there's a problem there.
Wow. They say success comes to those who are prepared. Is Uganda prepared to indeed participate effectively in hosting the 2027 African Cup of Nations that we, like Sarah said, successfully bidded through the Pamoja bid? Well, I think we can keep our fingers crossed and hope that by then we are ready to, partake of that very big opportunity. Otherwise, thank you very much, retired Major, Congressman, and Doctor, for your time. Of course, to the viewers, thank you as well for making time this Friday. October is here. It's the month of our independence. It's a chance for a new possibility. Just get out there, do what you can, work hard, and yeah, may God be on your side. Until next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.